everyone hear me? Cool. All right, I'm going to talk about two things. First of all, I'm going to talk about defense of the Baltics, because that's where a lot of the tension in this part of the world is, and how actually we best serve peace in the Baltics, not by raising tensions, but by trying to calm them, exactly the opposite of what the government wants to do. I'm also going to talk about Finnish defense in general, and because there are alternatives. It's not like we have no defense or we join NATO. There's lots of things that Finland can do and has done to have a credible defense of its country. Before that, I have quite a few points of kind of extraneous rebuttal. First of all, we just disagree fundamentally with the idea that, with the first point brought up by the Prime Minister, that we should use Finland as an instrument to attack Russia. We think that's against Finnish interests, and the mechanisms they describe would actually hurt the Finnish economy, hurt the view of Finland in Europe, in Russia, in other places. It's also not clear to us why these are particularly unique or effective tools, like why Finland is some kind of magical gateway to Europe for Russia. It's not. Russia has many much larger trading partners within the EU, like Germany, like France, like the Ukraine. The Finnish economy is very small. It's a country of 5 million people, so a lot of their economic and political effects are kind of overblown when you consider the weight that Finland has in Europe. We also have this idea that we make people feel safe, and that's what matters. We don't think it's true. I'm going to come back to the kind of overwhelming defense idea, but what matters is having a credible military that there's buy-in into from the people, and that's what Finland has when you have a reservist system and you have conscription for everyone. People in Finland do feel safe. And it's not just the military, it's also that Finland has taken a neutral stance since World War II on all conflicts. Finland is a very unique position in the world between the Western and Eastern spheres of influence. And when you're there, the only way you can really ensure peace and continuity is by having a neutral stance. No. Let's talk about these airspace violations. They were on the info slide, so the government kind of runs with them, tries to make them sound like bigger things they are. The truth is there are minor, very small infractions which happen all the time at basically the borders of all superpowers on the world, right? Like the US is infringing on Russian airspace in Europe, but also in other parts of the world all the time. Furthermore, like my partner already explained, it's mostly about Russian internal politics, about Putin, flexing his muscles. That's what you do when you're weak, not when you're strong, right? Like if you actually have plans to attack another country, you don't harass them, right? Like that's what you do when you have no such intent. You just try to bully them, remind you how big your army is, etc. Let's talk about defense. So they keep saying that we need overwhelming defense, and that NATO is going to give us that. We have a few problems with that. First of all, that's not true. You just need credible enough defense that attacking a country seems very likely to be highly costly for you. There's many ways of guaranteeing that, like many of the things Finland is already doing and could do that provide a credible enough defense. It would be extremely costly to attack Finland, and then the calculus goes in a way where it's just extremely unlikely. Furthermore, it's not clear that if we even join NATO, we would have that overwhelming defense, right? If you look at the NATO presence in Baltic countries, for instance, it's not enough to deter Russia to attack. In fact, quite the opposite.
On this exactly.
No. Then let's talk about Finland. As the previous speaker had this idea that it's important for Finland to be kind of a NATO proxy in the area. She's directly challenged to name a country that this affects, wherein we have a situation that the Baltics are already in NATO. Sweden doesn't really face a direct threat from Russia, so it'd be nice to hear an example of what countries would actually benefit from this and what those exact mechanisms are.
Question.
No. Okay, so let's talk about defense of the Baltics. So we believe that defending, retaining peace in the region comes about mainly through calming tensions instead of intensifying and escalating them. How does the government do that? First of all, just merely by expanding NATO influence, right? You would be moving NATO forces to basically within 300 kilometers of St. Petersburg, Putin's home city, his favorite city, one of the hearts of Russian culture and influence. That would be viewed in Russia and throughout the world as a very direct threat to Russia, as a very like intensifying of the situation. Furthermore, like Russia has explicitly said that we very much oppose Finland joining NATO. So it would also be like a direct rebuke to their their public policy, right? If they're known to oppose this, it's very unlikely that they're just going to sit back and that there won't be backlash, whatever form that takes. It could take the form of sanctions, for example, toward Finland, even if it's not like a direct military threat from them. We think those are really bad, and they also threaten the Baltics, right? Like the Baltics don't want Russia to be thinking about, our part of the world in terms of, like we're under threat and we need to, take military actions in this part of the world. So we believe in de-escalation. In just a moment, Olivia. Furthermore, we think that it's not effective in a few other ways. First of all, NATO is already in the Baltic countries. It's unclear what exactly is added by Finland also joining. If there's already a NATO presence there and like NATO provides overwhelming defense as they themselves claim, what exactly is the added benefit? It's very unclear to us. It's unlikely to actually help, especially as the Baltic countries are very small. Go on.
The analysis that I gave in my speech is that although those countries belong to NATO, NATO has very limited military bases in those countries. That means that it doesn't provide credible protection because the only countries that are willing to intervene that fund NATO significantly are really far away from the Baltic states. That is what Finland adds.
Finland is not that much closer than, for example, Poland. Also, if the problem is that there's not enough of a NATO military presence in those countries, then surely that military presence can be expanded instead of having a whole new country join NATO, kind of escalating the conflict, as I explained. Right, so just to finish up on this, like how does Finnish participation in NATO change, like how the defense of the Baltics would work? Would a few Finnish soldiers really make the difference as, the tanks roll over the border into Estonia? We don't think so. We don't think that's likely to be a large component in the calculus for Russia if they do decide to take military actions in the Baltics. We think, just quickly, there are alternatives. We can, NATO can do more in the Baltics, and Finland can do more domestically to provide a credible defense, because that's what defending your country is all about, is making it costly enough for anyone to invade. We're proud to oppose.